Konnichiwa, pakusetachi. I'm Puppy-Sensei, the puppy girl Japanese teacher VTuber of Irium US. I make Japanese language content to help you level up your abilities. Thank you once again for your patience with me last week. I took most of the week off because I, once more, really needed a bit of a breather. I think I've been trying to do too much. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about the no particle in Japanese. This particle has a somewhat diverse set of interpretations, but actually deploying it is pretty easy for the most part. Let's look at our grammar card and get a bit more understanding. Alright, so here we see no. It doesn't really mean anything. It modifies nouns and it occasionally indicates some kind of possession, right? Like some things, like an apostrophe S, that kind of feeling. So anyway, today we're going to be looking at this no particle that modifies nouns in various ways. We'll talk a little bit about the different types of modifications that we can achieve using this no. This will include noun plus no phrases, as well as noun plus no plus noun phrases. It'll also include particle plus no phrases, and also non-noun, example verb, plus no phrases. However, I do want to make one thing clear, and that's the fact that we are not today talking about the use of no as a sentence-ending colloquial question-marking particle. We won't be discussing the use of this no particle today because, well, mostly the sentence-ending no isn't really the same as this no. But that's a story for another lesson. At the very most basic level, you're often going to see the particle no in sentences like this one. これは私の帽子です。これは私の帽子です。This is my hat. Do you like it? I have some other ones. If you don't love this one, then... How about that? これも私の帽子です。This is also my hat. The no that we're seeing in this sentence is acting like a possessive marker. You might think of it a lot like an apostrophe S in English. It indicates the ownership that I have over my hat. Whose hat is it? It's my hat. 私の帽子ですね? Okay. We can think of lots of examples of sentences like this that have this same possessive sense of the particle no. We can even link possessiveness. So we could say, これは私の帽子の上です。これは私の帽子の上です。This is the top of my hat. You can see it right up there. Or we might say, これは私の帽子の上の鉢です。これは私の帽子の上の鉢です。This is the B at the top of my hat. In each of these cases, we're sort of using no to highlight the relationship between the preceding and the following noun. It doesn't always look exactly like possession, though. Like, look at ue no hachi. Ue no hachi. Here we see it. In a purely possessive interpretation of the particle no, wouldn't ue no hachi mean the top of my hat's B? The B that belongs to the top of my hat? No. But also yes. The no here is acting as apostrophe S in the same way that of is acting the same way in the phrase students of Japanese, right? That kind of is the same no. So students of Japanese in the Japanese language would be Nihongo no gakusei tachi ですね. Students of the Japanese language. Does the Japanese language own the students? No. Especially not in the same way that I own my hat. It's my hat. but neither the students nor the Japanese language own the other one. But the relationship really kind of still is the same. What we're really doing here is we're qualifying what kind of student it is. Just like we're qualifying what kind of bee it is in boshi no ue no hachi. It's the bee of the top of my hat, or the bee on top of my hat if we wanted to put it in simpler English, right? And just in the same way, Nihongo no gakusei tachi is students of the Japanese language. There's no ownership. We're just kind of comparing the two. We're describing one as belonging to a set of another, right? Therefore, there is an argument to be made that it's not entirely or exactly the same thing that's going on with no when we think about possession or apostrophe s. No isn't purely limited to cases where it indicates only this idea of possession. But what it almost always does is modify the noun that follows it. Or in some cases, modify the noun that it follows. It, in some way, is performing the work of modifying nouns. Take a moment to consider the following example. Be warned, I'm gonna get all political for a moment here. Transgender no Puppy-Sensei. Transgender no Puppy-Sensei. It is my humble opinion that this is a great example to illustrate the idea that no should be thought of less as setting up possessiveness in the same way that apostrophe s does in English, and more that the particle no acts as something of a descriptor. It can be used to give extra information about the thing in question. I happen to be a trans woman. It's not the forefront of who I am. It's not the Puppy-Sensei part of me, which refers to all that I am, but me being a trans woman happens to add something to who I am. It adds additional information. It's only part of who I am. And so in the phrase, transgender no Puppy-Sensei, Puppy-Sensei is me. That's the whole of me. That's everything. But we're modifying me by pulling out a smaller part, one part of my identity, and that one small part is the fact that I happen to be transgender. And I'm also a translator, so I am a transgender translator, and that's very funny. Anyway, when no follows a noun, it's often playing this kind of role. It can connect you with the company that you work for, right? So, 近々の会社の会社員ですね。近々の会社の会社員。An employee from such and such company. Just like that. Basically, an employee of whatever company it is. Yes, I also note that there's a no between shikajika and kaisha, and yes, that is the same no. It's also giving a description of what kind of kaisha it is. What kind of company is it? It's such and such company. What employee is it? It's the employee from such and such company. This no is always playing this kind of role to answer kind of, in what category does this thing belong, right? And we can think of bigger and bigger and bigger circles, and we are really just talking about a descriptor from the point of view of putting it in some kind of category. In a way, it's almost like stamping it. It's this kind of thing. Likewise, no can also connect you to a country or a friend group or even an abstract concept, anything else that could be used to incorporate some one noun into the wider circle of some other noun, some kind of descriptor. As I said from the outset, however, noun plus no isn't the only time that we're going to utilize this modifier particle no. Sometimes we can create sentences where no is going to follow another particle. From a certain point of view, this really isn't all that different from the way that we've already used no with nouns. Let's look at an example. 日本からのお茶は美味しくても確かに苦いです。日本からのお茶は美味しくても確かに苦いです。Tea from Japan is delicious, but it sure is bitter. We can see here that the no is performing a really similar role to the one that we saw in the case of nouns. It's telling us what kind of tea we're talking about, specifically tea that comes from Japan. The role of kara here is a particle, and it's a particle that indicates where the tea is coming from. But the no is kind of cutting out a smaller piece of pie. It's not just all tea that is delicious but very bitter, but specifically what we're talking about here is that tea that comes from Japan is being described as delicious but also bitter. The thing is, with this specific sentence, removing the kara doesn't really have all that much impact, right? So we started with Nihon kara no ocha, tea from Japan. But if we take out the kara, then we get Nihon no ocha, Japanese tea. Okay, well, these two things aren't all that different, right? One would presume that Japanese tea is probably going to be tea that's coming from Japan. I guess it doesn't really matter, but these two segments don't feel all that different from one another. However, that is not going to be the case in the following example. Let's look. Sensei e no tegami o mitsukemasen. Sensei e no tegami o mitsukemasen. I can't find my letter to Sensei. I have a letter to Sensei. It's my Sensei e no tegami, my letter that's headed in the direction of Sensei. The no here describes the letter as being one that is headed in the direction of Sensei. It's a letter to Sensei, right? But if we remove the e in this sentence, then we get this. Sensei no tegami o mitsukemasen. I can't find the letter belonging to Sensei. Not the letter that's headed in the direction of Sensei, but Sensei's letter. I can't find Sensei's letter. You could maybe interpret this as the letter that you plan to send to Sensei, but only from the perspective that that letter belongs to or is intended for Sensei. In that case, yes, I suppose it is Sensei's letter, even if you haven't sent it yet because you have plans to direct it in Sensei's direction. Anyway, basically, anytime you have no following a particle, we're really just adding such information as this is a noun for the intention of this direction, this purpose, or something like that. Okay, now, there's one last use of no that we're going to cover, and we're going to kind of breeze through it just a little bit. When no follows a verb or an adjective, basically any non-noun, non-particle, it creates a new noun from that verb or adjective or other kind of word. Example, 読むのは幸せにする。読むのは幸せにする. Reading makes me feel happy, or reading makes me happy. Here, 読む is a verb. 読む is the verb that means to read. But by adding no to the end, we are coercing 読む to act as if it were a noun. It's now reading, not to read. It's the act of reading. And that becomes a noun. And then we're using wa to mark that new noun, the act of reading, as the subject of the sentence, reading makes me feel happy. We see this also in the case with sentences that use ga, as in this sentence. 甘いものを食べるの the eating of sweet stuff が嫌いです。I don't like it. It's not for me. 甘いものを食べるのが嫌いです。I don't like eating sweet stuff. I don't like eating things that are sweet. Really, it's the same as the earlier example. It's verb plus no, creating a nominal form that means the doing of that thing. So here we have 食べるの, which means the eating of, or the act of eating, something like that. We have created a noun using a verb. I could say a lot more about this nominalizing use of no. It can be used to nominalize past tense plain verbs. It can be used to nominalize adjectives. It can turn relative phrases into full noun phrases. But ultimately, I don't want to hammer home the point too very much here. Basically, when we see no following a non-noun form, it's basically going to be always creating a noun. It's not too difficult in my opinion, right? So we just see verb plus no, and we know that that creates a nominal. It creates a new noun, right? Do note that it's probably always going to be casual form that we're seeing. It'll be either casual non-past or casual past, and then we'll have no immediately afterward, and then you'll probably have some other particle following that, because odds are pretty good that that's either going to be the object of the sentence or it's going to be the subject of the sentence, right? You are doing something to the noun that is the act of doing something, or the noun that is the act of doing something is having some effect on something else, right? Of course, if you have any additional questions on this, or if you want to know more, you know where to find me. I'm always very, very, very happy to answer your questions. For now, though, let's spin our wheel of grammar. All right, here we go. And it's gonna be どうやって? Ooh, okay, どうやって. Awesome. So we're gonna talk about どうやって next week. I'm looking forward to it. Please know that you're all getting a gold star today for being such really, really, really good students. I hope you learned a lot about the particle no. Until next time, また来週!
Thanks for watching. I'm glad you watched until the end. You can find my other content here. Also, it would make me really happy if you would check out jinxedgaming.com. If you're into zero-calorie gaming fuel and Oshi cups, you will love their products. Puppy-Sensei recommends the tangy strawberry flavor. It's so yummy. Remember to use code SENSEI at checkout for 10% off your order. Can't wait to see you next time. Mata ne!